The arrival of the Draconian Armada. The quiet hum of Earth's deep space monitoring station broke with a sharp, piercing alarm. Lieutenant Sarah Monroe, the head of the station, frowned as she leaned over the console. The system rarely triggered false alarms, but the data streaming in was unlike anything she had seen before. "Lieutenant, you might want to see this," a technician called out, his voice shaking slightly. Sarah's eyes darted to the main screen, and her heart sank. A massive cluster of objects was moving toward Earth at unimaginable speeds. At first, it looked like a meteor shower, but the formation was too precise. Each object seemed to follow a deliberate trajectory. "Magnify," Sarah ordered, her voice calm despite the growing tension in the room. The technician zoomed in, and the image became clearer. What they saw made the entire room fall silent. Gigantic ships, each larger than Earth's tallest skyscrapers, drifted through space like silent predators. Their hulls shimmered with an alien metal that reflected the cold light of distant stars. "Are those?" Another officer started to speak but trailed off. "Ships," Sarah confirmed. "Not ours." The room erupted into activity. Alarms blared, messages were sent to Earth's Defense Command, and every available satellite was reoriented to track the approaching fleet. Within minutes, Earth's highest-ranking officials had been notified. In a secure underground bunker, the Global Defense Council convened. President Alan Hayes stood at the head of the table, his face pale but determined. "Give me a report," he demanded. General Marcus Holt, the head of Earth's military forces, stepped forward. "We're tracking over 50 ships, each capable of carrying thousands of troops or weapons. They're not responding to our signals, and their technology is far more advanced than ours. Based on their trajectory, they'll reach Earth's orbit in 48 hours. "What do they want?" the president asked, though he already feared the answer. No one responded. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant sound of static from a nearby radio. Meanwhile, aboard the lead ship of the alien fleet, Supreme Commander Varrock of the Draconian Armada gazed at the blue planet on the holographic display. His scaled fingers tapped against the armrest of his throne. "Such a small, fragile world," Varrock muttered, his voice a deep growl. "Yet it has defied the galaxy's natural order for too long." The Draconians were conquerors. Their fleet had subjugated dozens of planets, each falling quickly to their superior firepower and tactics. Earth was simply the next target, a stepping stone in their plan to dominate the galaxy. "Supreme Commander," one of his officers spoke, bowing low. "Our scouts confirm minimal resistance. Their defenses are primitive compared to our might." Varrock smirked, his sharp teeth glinting under the dim light of the command deck. "Humans are an arrogant species. They believe their planet is unique, their lives valuable. We will show them the truth." The fleet's weapon systems were activated, their energy cores glowing with a menacing red light. The Draconian ships moved in perfect unison, like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. Back on Earth, panic was spreading. News channels broadcast blurry images of the alien ships, their headlines filled with speculation and fear. Cities prepared for evacuation, bunkers were opened, and citizens stocked up on supplies. In the middle of the chaos, Dr. Elias Grant, a reclusive scientist, was brought to the Defense Council. He was a tall, thin man with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through the room. "We can't fight them," Grant said bluntly as soon as he entered the room. "Not with conventional weapons." "And what do you suggest?" General Holt demanded, crossing his arms. Grant's lips curled into a small, enigmatic smile. "There's something beneath the surface of this planet, something we've kept hidden for decades. If the Draconians want to fight, perhaps it's time we introduce them to Earth's fury." His words sent a ripple through the room. President Hayes leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "You're talking about it, aren't you?" Grant nodded. "Yes. The Fury Project." The room fell silent again, but this time, the silence was different. It wasn't fear that lingered in the air. It was a mixture of dread and anticipation. "We've never tested it," General Holt said, his voice quieter now. If it fails. It won't fail, Grant interrupted. But if we don't use it, Earth will fall. You've seen their fleet. They won't stop until they've crushed us. We don't have a choice. President Hayes stood, his hands trembling slightly as he placed them on the table. He glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of each person present. Activate the Fury Project. If we're going down, we're not going down without a fight. Above the planet, the Draconian fleet grew closer, their ships casting massive shadows across the void. Earth had faced threats before, but this was different. This was a battle for survival against an enemy that viewed humanity as nothing more than insects. The countdown had begun. In 48 hours, the Draconian Armada would arrive. The world would watch as humanity made its stand against an enemy unlike any it had ever faced. And deep beneath the Earth's surface, a hidden power stirred. A secret weapon that might be their only hope. But would it be enough to stop the unstoppable? Humanity's secret weapon. The war room was silent after President Hayes gave the order. His words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy with the weight of their meaning. Activate the Fury Project. General Holt was the first to break the silence. We'll need immediate authorization to access the site. It's been sealed for decades. There's no telling if. It will work. Dr. Elias Grant interrupted sharply, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. It has to. Let's hope you're right, Holt replied, though his tone betrayed his doubt. Far beneath the surface of the Nevada desert, a team of engineers worked to unseal a facility hidden for nearly 50 years. The Fury Project had been conceived during a time of paranoia and desperation, a relic of the Cold War when humanity feared annihilation from within its own borders. But this weapon wasn't nuclear. It wasn't biological. It was something else entirely, something that defied conventional science. The elevator descended into the Earth with a low hum, carrying General Holt, Dr. Grant, and a small team of technicians. The atmosphere was tense, the kind of tension that made every breath feel heavy. How deep does this go? One of the younger technicians asked, his voice shaking. About 2 miles, Grant replied without looking up. His gaze was fixed on the reinforced doors that awaited them at the bottom. The deeper we hit it, the safer we thought we'd be. Turns out, safety is a relative term. When the elevator finally stopped, the doors slid open with a mechanical hiss, revealing a cavernous chamber bathed in dim, flickering light. Rows of machinery lined the walls, their designs unfamiliar even to the seasoned engineers. At the center of the room stood a massive, spherical device, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed almost organic. General Holt stepped forward cautiously. So this is it, the Fury. Grant nodded, his expression unreadable. It's more than just a weapon. It's a deterrent, a last resort. And now, it's our only hope. Above ground, the Draconian fleet loomed ever closer. Their ships moved like predators, silent and deliberate, their weapons systems glowing with anticipation. On the flagship, Supreme Commander Varrock watched the planet grow larger in the viewing window. Humans are weak, Varrock growled. They scramble like insects, trying to defend their fragile little world. But their fear will consume them long before we do. One of his officers stepped forward, bowing deeply. Commander, our scans show increased energy readings beneath the planet's surface. It appears they're activating some sort of weapon. Varrock smirked, his sharp teeth gleaming. Let them. No human creation can match the power of the Draconian Armada. But even as he spoke, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his mind. The humans were unpredictable. That was what made them dangerous. Back in the underground facility, Dr. Grant was preparing to power up the Fury. His hands trembled slightly as he entered the final sequence into the control panel. This is it, he said, his voice low. Once we activate it, there's no turning back. General Holt stood at his side, his jaw clenched. Do it. The chamber filled with a low hum as the Fury began to awaken. The intricate patterns on its surface started to glow, emitting a light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air grew heavy, charged with an energy that made the technician's hair stand on end. "What exactly is it going to do?" one of the engineers asked nervously. Grant hesitated for a moment before answering. "It doesn't destroy in the way you think. The Fury manipulates energy on a massive scale. It can disrupt anything: power systems, weapons, even organic matter. But it's not just destruction. It's adaptive. It learns." "Learns?" Holt repeated, narrowing his eyes. Grant nodded. "The Fury isn't just a weapon. It's a living system, designed to counter any threat it encounters. The more advanced the enemy, the more powerful the Fury becomes." The countdown had begun. On the surface, military forces around the globe braced for impact, their defenses dwarfed by the sheer size of the Draconian ships. Civilians huddled in shelters, watching the news with bated breath as reporters struggled to maintain composure. "This is not the end," President Hayes declared in a live broadcast. "This is the beginning of humanity's greatest fight. We will not go quietly. We will stand, and we will fight." The broadcast was interrupted by an eerie silence, followed by a transmission from the Draconians. Varroc's imposing figure filled the screen, his cold, reptilian eyes staring into every home and command center on Earth. "Humans," he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Your resistance is futile. Surrender now, and we may show mercy. Fight, and your world will burn." The message cut off abruptly, leaving behind a chilling stillness. Back in the underground facility, the Fury's activation reached its peak. The pulsing light grew brighter, and the hum became a roar. Dr. Grant's voice rose above the noise. "Once this starts, there's no stopping it. The Fury will engage the enemy fleet automatically." General Holt's gaze was fixed on the device. "Then let's hope it works." Above them, the first wave of Draconian ships began entering Earth's atmosphere. The skies darkened as their massive shadows stretched across the land. But deep beneath the surface, Earth's secret weapon was waking up, ready to unleash a power no one, not even the humans, fully understood. Would it be enough to stop the invincible? The first strike. The sky above Earth grew darker as the Draconian ships moved into formation. Each vessel was a testament to their dominance, sleek, massive, and bristling with weaponry that glowed faintly in the atmosphere. The people on the ground stared upward in silent terror, their faces lit by the eerie red light emanating from the fleet. On the surface, Earth's military launched its initial counterattack. Fighter jets and missiles streaked into the air, leaving trails of smoke as they raced toward the invaders. Command centers buzzed with frantic activity, their screens tracking the battle in real time. Missiles locked on target, a soldier announced in one of the bases. "Fire." Dozens of projectiles shot toward the closest Draconian ship, a towering behemoth that hovered over the Pacific Ocean. For a moment, hope flickered in the hearts of the soldiers as the missiles closed in. But just before impact, the alien ship's hull shimmered, and an invisible shield absorbed the explosions with ease. "Direct hit. No effect," another soldier reported, his voice trembling. On board the flagship, Supreme Commander Varroc watched the scene with a smirk. "Pathetic," he growled. "They fling sticks and stones at the gods." "Should we begin the counterstrike, Commander?" one of his officers asked. Varroc nodded, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Show them why we are feared across the galaxy." The first Draconian ship opened fire, and the results were catastrophic. A single beam of energy shot from its weapon, striking the Pacific Ocean and vaporizing a massive area of water. The resulting shockwave sent tsunamis crashing into coastal cities, causing devastation that stretched for miles. Across the planet, similar scenes played out as the Draconian fleet demonstrated its overwhelming power. Cities burned, communications went dark, and Earth's forces scrambled to regroup. In the Global Defense Council's war room, President Hayes slammed his fist on the table. "This is a massacre. We need to deploy the Fury now." General Holt stood at attention, his face grim. Dr. Grant reports that the Fury is still calibrating. We can't use it until it's fully activated. How long? Hayes demanded. 6 hours, Holt replied. The president shook his head. We might not have 6 hours. Deep underground, in the hidden facility, Dr. Grant and his team worked tirelessly to bring the Fury online. The spherical device pulsed with energy, its glow intensifying with each passing moment. Status report. Grant shouted over the hum of machinery. We're at 85% power, one of the technicians replied. But the system is detecting anomalies in the energy flow. Grant frowned, his mind racing. The Fury was designed to adapt to threats, but its intelligence came with risks. If the system failed to stabilize, the weapon could destroy more than just the Draconian fleet. It could tear apart the planet itself. Keep it stable, he ordered. We can't afford any mistakes. Above ground, the battle raged on. Earth's remaining forces launched a desperate assault, targeting the smaller Draconian ships in an attempt to buy time. A squadron of fighter jets, led by Captain Eric Sanders, managed to dodge the alien weapons and fire directly at the engines of one ship. For Earth, Sanders yelled as his missiles struck their target. The explosion rocked the alien vessel, and for the first time, a Draconian ship faltered. It didn't fall, but the damage was enough to slow it down. Cheers erupted in the command center as they watched the footage. We hit them. We can fight back, one officer exclaimed. But the celebration was short-lived. The damaged ship unleashed a retaliatory strike, obliterating the squadron in a single merciless blast. In the war room, the president lowered his head, his shoulders heavy with the weight of loss. We can't keep throwing lives at them, he muttered. The Fury has to work. It's our only chance. On the flagship, Varrock watched the humans' futile resistance with a mixture of amusement and irritation. They're more stubborn than I expected, he admitted. Should we increase the intensity of the assault? One of his officers asked. Varrock considered the question. No. Let them struggle. Their desperation will make their defeat all the more satisfying. But keep an eye on their hidden weapon. Whatever they're preparing, it could be troublesome. Despite his confidence, a nagging sense of unease crept into Varrock's mind. The humans were weak, yes, but they were also unpredictable. Their history was filled with improbable victories, acts of defiance that defied logic. And now, they were preparing something that even his advanced technology couldn't fully detect. In the underground facility, the Fury reached 95% power. The room was bathed in its radiant glow, and the air crackled with energy. Dr. Grant's face was pale, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. Almost there, he muttered. Just a little longer. One of the technicians glanced nervously at the monitors. The energy readings are off the charts. If this thing goes critical, it won't. Grant snapped, though his own voice wavered. The countdown to activation continued. Outside, the world was on the brink of collapse. Cities lay in ruins, and millions of lives had already been lost. But in the face of annihilation, humanity clung to a fragile hope. As the Draconian fleet prepared for its final assault, the Fury prepared to awaken. Would it be Earth's salvation or its destruction? Awakening the Fury. The world was teetering on the edge of annihilation. From the vast deserts of Africa to the frozen tundras of Siberia, the Draconian fleet's shadow loomed over every corner of Earth. Their weapons rained destruction upon cities, and the skies were choked with smoke. Yet, amidst the chaos, one glimmer of hope remained, a weapon hidden beneath the surface, ready to turn the tide. In the war room, President Hayes stared at the live feeds from across the globe. The devastation was almost too much to comprehend. Fires raged unchecked, entire cities lay in ruins, and millions of people had perished in the relentless assault. Yet, even now, humanity refused to surrender. Status on the Fury, Hayes demanded, his voice hoarse but determined. General Holt straightened his posture. though his face betrayed his exhaustion. Dr. Grant reports we're at 98%. Full activation is minutes away. Minutes, Hayes repeated, gripping the edge of the table. We just need to hold on a little longer. A deep rumble shook the room as another Draconian ship unleashed its weapon, sending a shockwave that reached even the underground command center. The lights flickered, and for a moment, everyone held their breath. We can't afford delays, Hayes said firmly. If this fails, it's over. 2 miles beneath the Nevada desert, the Fury stood at the center of a whirlwind of energy. Its glowing surface pulsed rhythmically, the intricate patterns shifting like a living organism. Dr. Grant wiped sweat from his brow as he monitored the system. His team worked in near silence, each person fully aware of the stakes. Power levels are stable, one technician reported. Good, Grant replied. Keep them that way. The countdown to full activation ticked closer to 0, each passing second feeling like an eternity. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared, and red lights flashed across the room. What's happening? Grant demanded, spinning toward the source of the alert. Energy surge detected. A technician shouted. The Fury is reacting to something. External. Grant's eyes widened. External. What cooled? Before he could finish, the main screen lit up with a visual feed of the Draconian flagship. Its massive form hung in orbit, and its weapons were clearly priming for a direct strike. They've locked onto us, another technician exclaimed. They know about the Fury, Grant said grimly. They're trying to destroy it before we can activate it. On board the Draconian flagship, Supreme Commander Varrock's expression was one of cold determination. He had underestimated the humans' resourcefulness, but he would not make the same mistake twice. Prepare the primary cannon, Varrock ordered. If their weapon is beneath the surface, we'll obliterate the entire region. Coordinates locked. An officer confirmed. Firing in 60 seconds. Varrock's claws tapped against the armrest of his chair as he watched the countdown. The humans had fought bravely, but their defiance would end here. Back in the underground facility, Dr. Grant's team worked frantically to stabilize the Fury. The energy surge threatened to overload the system, and the imminent threat from the Draconian flagship only added to the chaos. Can we activate it now? General Holt demanded, his voice rising over the alarms. Grant shook his head. Not yet. If we rush the process, we could trigger a catastrophic failure. The Fury is powerful, but it's delicate. One wrong move, and it could destroy us all. The war room crackled to life on a nearby screen, and President Hayes appeared. Doctor, we're out of time, he said bluntly. The Draconians are about to fire on your location. If the Fury isn't ready, it won't matter. Grant clenched his fists, his mind racing. The countdown to activation was at 99%, but the energy surge made every second unpredictable. What if we direct the Fury's energy outward? One of the technicians suggested. Grant turned to the technician, his brow furrowing. You mean use it before it's fully calibrated? Yes, the technician replied. If we redirect the energy into the atmosphere, it might disrupt the Draconian weapon systems long enough for full activation. It's a gamble, Grant muttered. It's the only option, Holt said firmly. Grant hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Do it. As the Draconian flagship prepared to fire, a sudden pulse of energy erupted from the surface of the planet. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. There was no beam, no explosion. Instead, it was a wave, invisible to the naked eye, but powerful enough to disrupt electromagnetic systems across a massive radius. On board the Draconian ships, alarms blared as systems flickered and failed. What's happening? Varrock roared. Unknown interference. An officer shouted. Our weapons are offline. Varrock's claws dug into the armrest. The humans. They've activated their weapon. In the underground facility, the Fury hummed with newfound stability. The energy surge had been redirected, and the countdown to full activation reached its final moments. Power levels are optimal, the technician reported. Grant exhaled deeply. Then it's time. Let's show them what the Fury can do. Above ground, the skies began to shift. The atmosphere crackled with energy as the Fury prepared to unleash its full power. For the first time, humanity wasn't just defending itself, it was striking back. Humanity's counterstrike. The skies over Earth glowed with an unnatural light as the Fury came to life. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a force of nature, a technological storm crafted by human ingenuity and desperation. The Draconian fleet, once an unstoppable juggernaut, now found itself on the defensive. On board the Draconian flagship, Supreme Commander Varrock gripped the edge of his command chair. The ship's lights flickered erratically, and warning signals filled the air. "Report," Varrock barked. "Our systems are still offline," an officer shouted. "Communications are down, and propulsion is unstable. Whatever the humans have unleashed, it's targeting our core technology." Varrock slammed a clawed fist into the armrest. Impossible. Their planet barely reached interstellar capabilities. How could they create something like this? Before anyone could respond, another pulse from the Fury rippled through the atmosphere. The Draconian fleet's smaller ships began to falter, their formations breaking apart as their engines sputtered and failed. In the war room, cheers erupted as the monitors displayed the unfolding scene. Draconian ships were dropping from the sky, their shields flickering out of existence. "It's working," General Holt exclaimed. "The Fury is neutralizing their fleet." President Hayes leaned forward, his expression a mixture of relief and determination. "This is our chance. Order all remaining forces to engage. Hit them with everything we have." Across the planet, Earth's militaries mobilized for a coordinated assault. Fighter jets, drones, and ground-based missile systems targeted the vulnerable Draconian ships, launching a barrage of attacks. Explosions lit up the night sky as the once dominant invaders found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned. Captain Eric Sanders, leading a squadron of advanced fighter jets, guided his team toward a damaged Draconian ship hovering over Europe. "Stay tight, everyone," Sanders said over the comms. "They're still dangerous, even without full power." "Copy that, Captain," came a reply. As they approached, the Draconian ship fired sporadically, its weapons struggling to lock onto the agile Earth fighters. Sanders aimed carefully and launched a missile directly into the ship's exposed hull. "Target hit," he shouted as the alien vessel erupted in flames. Around him, other squadrons achieved similar victories. One by one, the Draconian ships fell, their once formidable presence reduced to wreckage. Deep underground, in the Fury's control room, Dr. Grant and his team continued to monitor the weapon's performance. The device pulsed with energy, its glow growing brighter with each passing moment. "We've neutralized 60% of their fleet," one technician reported. Grant nodded, but his expression remained tense. "What about the flagship?" The room fell silent. The Draconian flagship, though weakened, was still operational. Its immense size and advanced shielding made it far more resilient than the rest of the fleet. On a nearby monitor, the flagship loomed ominously, its weapons slowly coming back online. On board the flagship, Varrock refused to accept defeat. "Reroute all remaining power to the main cannon," he ordered. "Commander, our systems are barely functioning," an officer protested. "I don't care," Varrock snarled. "If we go down, we take their planet with us. Fire the cannon." The flagship's massive cannon began to glow as it charged for one final devastating shot. In the war room, President Hayes watched in horror as the flagship prepared to fire. "What's the Fury's status?" he demanded. Dr. Grant's voice came through the comms. "It's at full power, but we're still calculating the safest way to target the flagship. If we're not precise, we could cause catastrophic collateral damage." "We don't have time for calculations," Hayes shouted. "Take the shot." Grant hesitated, his mind racing. The Fury was humanity's last hope, but its sheer power made it a double-edged sword. One mistake could doom the very planet it was meant to protect. "Doctor, General Holt said firmly. "We trust you. Do what needs to be done." Grant took a deep breath, his hands hovering over the controls. "Targeting the flagship," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. As the Fury locked onto the flagship, the air itself seemed to tremble. The device unleashed a concentrated beam of energy, a blinding column of light that pierced the sky and struck the Draconian flagship with pinpoint precision. The impact was immediate and devastating. The flagship's shields disintegrated, and its hull began to collapse under the immense force. On board, Varrock staggered to his feet as the ship's systems failed completely. "No," he muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. "This can't be." The flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. On Earth, people watched in stunned silence as the Draconian flagship was destroyed. Then, as the realization sank in, cheers erupted across the globe. The invincible invaders had been defeated, and humanity had survived. In the war room, President Hayes leaned back in his chair, exhaustion and relief washing over him. "We did it," he said quietly. "We actually did it." Dr. Grant, still in the control room, let out a shaky breath. "The Fury worked," he murmured. "But we got lucky." As the last remnants of the Draconian fleet retreated, Earth began to take stock of the cost of survival. Cities lay in ruins, and countless lives had been lost. But amidst the devastation, a new sense of unity emerged. Humanity had faced the brink of extinction, and had not only survived but emerged stronger. The aftermath of victory. The smoke had begun to clear, but the scars of the battle were everywhere. Across Earth's cities, the skyline was fractured, with buildings reduced to rubble and fires still smoldering in the ruins. The streets, once filled with fear, now carried the cautious hope of survivors emerging from hiding. The Draconian fleet had been defeated, but the cost of survival was undeniable. In the war room, President Hayes stood before a massive display screen showing a map of the planet. Red markers indicated areas devastated by the invasion, a sea of crimson stretching across every continent. Beside him, General Holt, his uniform smudged with ash, surveyed the damage reports. "How bad is it?" Hayes asked, though the answer was clear from the map. "Worse than we could have imagined," Holt replied gravely. "Millions are dead. Infrastructure is in shambles. Entire countries have gone dark." "And the Fury?" Holt sighed. "Dr. Grant's team is still monitoring it. It's stable, but barely. Using it again would be risky." Hayes nodded. "Let's hope we don't need to." At the underground facility, Dr. Grant sat alone in the observation room, staring at the Fury through a reinforced glass panel. The device, now dormant, emitted a faint glow, as if it were alive. "It saved us," he muttered to himself. "But at what cost?" The door opened, and a young technician entered hesitantly. "Dr. Grant, the President is requesting a status update." Grant turned to her, his face lined with exhaustion. "Tell him the Fury is intact, but the energy output is still fluctuating. If we try to use it again without extensive repairs, we're playing with fire." The technician nodded and left, leaving Grant alone with his thoughts. Elsewhere, across the planet, survivors began to rebuild. In New York, volunteers cleared debris from the streets, while medical teams worked tirelessly to treat the wounded. In Tokyo, engineers restored power to the city, and in Paris, the Eiffel Tower stood tall amidst the ruins, a symbol of resilience. Among the survivors, stories of heroism spread like wildfire. Pilots who had risked their lives to take down enemy ships, soldiers who had fought to protect civilians, and ordinary people who had shown extraordinary courage. Not everyone shared the optimism, however. In a remote Draconian outpost on the edge of the galaxy, a lone vessel received a distress signal from Earth. The message, fragmented but clear, spoke of humanity's impossible victory and the destruction of the Draconian flagship. Commander Killar, a high-ranking officer in the Draconian hierarchy, listened intently as the message repeated. "Humans, destroyed the fleet. Kalar muttered, his eyes narrowing. An officer beside him hesitated before speaking. It appears so, Commander. The weapon they used, it's unlike anything we've encountered before. Kalar leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Prepare a report for the Supreme Council. If the humans have developed this level of technology, they are no longer a primitive species. They are a threat. Back on Earth, in the United Nations building, representatives from the surviving nations convened to discuss the future. The room was filled with tension as leaders debated how to rebuild and prepare for potential retaliation. We need to unite, one representative argued. The Draconians will return, and next time, they'll be even more ruthless. Another shook their head. We can't afford to militarize. Our people need resources, not weapons. President Hayes raised a hand, silencing the room. Both points are valid, he said, but this isn't just about survival anymore. The Draconians saw us as weak as prey. We proved them wrong, but we need to ensure they never underestimate us again. That means rebuilding, yes, but also preparing for the next threat. The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. In the quiet of the night, as humanity celebrated its survival and mourned its losses, the stars above seemed to shimmer with a newfound intensity. For the first time, Earth was no longer just a solitary world in the vastness of space. It had made its mark, and the galaxy had taken notice. But as the survivors looked to the skies, they couldn't help but wonder, was the battle truly over, or was it just the beginning of something far greater? A new dawn, a looming threat. The stars sparkled in the endless black canvas of space, distant and serene, oblivious to the chaos that had unfolded around Earth. The Draconian Armada was no more, and humanity had earned its victory. But peace was a fragile thing, and the silence following the battle carried its own kind of dread. Earth's resilience. The cities began to heal, and so did the people. Across the globe, humanity rallied together like never before. Streets once littered with rubble were now alive with the sounds of rebuilding. Makeshift hospitals buzzed with activity as doctors treated the wounded. In New York, a young boy stood with his father, staring at a damaged skyscraper. Its upper floors had collapsed during the invasion, leaving the building a jagged shadow of its former self. "Will it ever be the same, Dad?" the boy asked. His father placed a hand on his shoulder, looking at the horizon. Maybe not the same, but maybe better. Similar scenes played out across the world. Humanity wasn't just repairing what was broken, it was growing stronger. The Draconian fallout. Light years away, in the heart of Draconian space, Supreme Leader Xiran paced the grand chamber of the Imperial Citadel. "You're telling me," Xiran growled, his voice a low rumble, "that the humans, a primitive species barely capable of interstellar travel, destroyed our fleet?" Kalar, the commander who had received the distress signal, knelt before him. "Yes, Supreme Leader. Their weapon was unlike anything we've encountered. Our technology was rendered useless." Xiran's crimson eyes narrowed, his tail flicking angrily. "And what of Varrock? Did he die with honor?" Kalar hesitated. "He underestimated them. Supreme Leader, he believed the humans posed no real threat." Xiran let out a low growl. "Then he was a fool. But we will not repeat his mistakes. Begin preparations for retaliation. If the humans want to play with fire, we'll show them the full wrath of the Draconian Empire." The warning. Back on Earth, amidst the rebuilding, scientists worked tirelessly to analyze the remnants of the Draconian technology. In the underground Fury facility, Dr. Grant sat hunched over a console, reviewing data streams from the battlefield. "Doctor," a voice called from the doorway. It was a young technician, her expression uneasy. "You need to see this." Grant followed her to a secondary console, where a faint signal had been detected coming from deep space. "What is it?" Grant asked, his brow furrowing. "We believe it's a Draconian transmission," she replied. "Intercepted shortly after their retreat. They're regrouping, Doctor." Grant's stomach sank. He turned to a nearby intercom and pressed the button. "Get me the president. Now." The Council's dilemma. In the United Nations Assembly Hall, world leaders gathered once more, their faces etched with worry. The intercepted signal played on repeat, distorted draconian growls and clicks that translated into a single chilling message. "We will return, and next time, we will not fail." President Hayes stood before the assembly, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "This isn't over," he said. "The Draconians are regrouping, and we have to assume they'll come back stronger. We have two choices: wait for their attack, or meet them on our terms." A murmur rippled through the room. "And how do you propose we do that?" a delegate from Europe asked. Hayes glanced at General Holt, who stood beside him. "We take the fight to them," Holt said firmly. "We've already proven we can outsmart them. If we strike before they recover, we have a chance to end this war for good." A united front. The decision was made. Earth would not wait for another invasion. Resources were pooled, and for the first time in history, humanity worked as one to prepare for an offensive. Scientists enhanced the Fury's capabilities, engineers developed advanced spacecraft, and soldiers trained relentlessly for the battles to come. The flagship of Earth's new fleet, the Resolute, was unveiled, a massive warship built with reverse-engineered Draconian technology and powered by the Fury's energy core. The departure. On the day of the launch, crowds gathered around every spaceport, cheering as humanity's first interstellar fleet prepared to leave Earth. President Hayes stood on a platform overlooking the launch site, addressing the crowd. "Today, we show the galaxy that humanity will not be defeated. Today, we take the first step towards securing our future. And today, we send a message to the Draconians. Earth does not bow." The crowd erupted in cheers as the Resolute's engines roared to life. The journey ahead. As the fleet entered hyperspace, Captain Eric Sanders, now commanding the Resolute, gazed at the stars ahead. His crew, a mix of seasoned soldiers and eager recruits, buzzed with nervous energy. "Any regrets, Captain?" his second-in-command asked. Sanders smirked. "Just one," he said. "That we didn't do this sooner." The final scene. Back on Earth, Dr. Grant stood in the Fury's control room, watching as its energy pulsed rhythmically. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing a dangerous game. "Be careful out there," he whispered, as if the departing fleet could hear him. And in the darkness of space, far from Earth, a Draconian fleet gathered, their weapons primed and their vengeance burning brighter than ever. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun.